The days are slow when they are slow, and fast when they are fast. Once you have no worries, life is not so hard. It will grow wings. Then you can fly, fly as fast as you want, fly wherever you want. Dunfang doesn't care. After Dunfang knew that he had kneeled to Wu Manling, his hope to be a soldier was gone. Can't have it. How can he meet Wu Manling? Can't. Dunfang didn't go anywhere and locked himself in the small hut on the pig farm all day. It was a bit boring, but it was a good thing. He didn't have to worry about meeting Wu Manling. What a big snow! What a big snow! The signs of snow were actually very obvious yesterday afternoon. The sky was very low, cloudy, and sticky as if a thick layer of paste had been applied. After dark, the snow began to fall, and no one cared about it. It was a blizzard overnight, especially big. Because there's no wind, it is silent, not floating, but falling to the ground, piece by piece. In the end half of the night, heavy snow blocked the Lixia River plains. The village is gone, the winter wheat is gone, and the earth is leveled and smooth, whereas the haystacks are swollen, as are the low thatched sheds. They are round, with a thick yet full profile. Cute. Only the trees remain as they were. Their branches are bare, thinner, and sharper still, yet looking trouble-making. Dunfang did not wake up. Strictly speaking, he was awakened by the reflection of the snow. The reflections of the snow were fierce and sharp, and they rushed in through the door, stronger than the summer sun. Dunfang opened his eyes and saw a silver world as soon as he opened his eyes. He got up, and Camel was already cooking pig food there. The firelight made his face red, and his face had a relationship between light and dark, and the three-dimensional effect was enhanced, just like a picture in a color movie. When Dunfang came to the door, a brand new world appeared in front of him, immensely. The world is clear, reflective, and unfamiliar. He doesn't know when and where he is. Dunfang narrowed his eyes, took a big mouthful, and the chilling air rushed into his body at once, piercing his muscles. Dunfang exhaled, and the milky white air wafted out of his mouth immediately. Dunfang noticed that his breath was actually milky white, splitting into two strands in his nostrils, floating in front of him, one after another. Interesting. Dunfang heard the pigs groan, turned around, and noticed that the black little sow was already lying in their hut, not far from the stove. This black sow has no longer been a bride. She has been pregnant for a long time, and her belly has long been raised. It must have been Camel who got up in the middle of the night and invited it into the house. She was happy at the moment, very peacefully pregnant there. The little sow brought a strong smell, the smell of livestock, plus the straws and the boiled pig food. The air in the hut was extraordinarily complicated, thick and dirty, but not unpleasant. On the contrary, it was harmony. Dunfang glanced at Camel's red face. The atmosphere in the small hut was wonderful. The people seemed to be wrapped by something, and there was a rich energy and some warmth. It is the appearance of not worrying about food and clothing, and the appearance of being in full swing. On such a snowy day, it was exceptionally good. Seeing Dunfang getting up, Camel brought 2 old corn cobs and roasted them in the pot. Just for a while, the fragrance of the old corn overflowed, rippling, and filled the small hut. After Camel roasted the old corn, he said in a loud voice, "Dunfang, the road is not easy to walk. Don't go home for breakfast. Eat 2 cobs to fill your stomach." Duanfang could hear that Camel was flattering him, and he was worried that Duanfang would drive the black sow out. Duanfang understood his mind. This camel, for the pig, can put his face down. Duanfang took the black old corn cobs, sat on the threshold, knocked the old corn on the threshold, and ate it hot. After taking 2 bites, he felt a little thirsty, so he grabbed a handful of snow and put it in his mouth. It was like drinking. Duanfang nibbled and drank. This breakfast was pretty good. It's delicious. The black sow must have been summoned by the aroma and came to Duanfang. It watched Duanfang pitifully through its big ears and snorted. When almost done, Duanfang broke off a few corn kernels and put them in his palm, and the black sow licked it away. The black sow's stomach is really not small. It has reached the level of being overwhelmed, and the stomach is sticking to the ground. The nipples are dragging on the ground. Duanfang blinked his eyes and remembered that it had been breathing for some days, and she would give birth in a few days. Would she give birth to a bunch of little camels? Shouldn't. All the pigs in the pig pen not far away were growling. They must be hungry and cold, and their voices are not the same as usual, a little shivering. Camel was not in a hurry. He cooked the pig food and hot water, took the bucket, and began to serve the pig food. After the preparation was finished, he put his hand into the pig food and stirred hard so that the cold and heat were evenly distributed. Duanfang turned his head, looked at the snow all over the ground, and stood up. He took the big spoon from Camel's hand and said, "The floor is slippery. You can rest. I'll do it today." Camel was not gracious. His hands were dripping water, so he cleaned his knot with his sleeve and said with a smile, "One may be bound to others because of the things they gave you. You ate my crops. It's your turn." It was freezing and snowing, but the sky was clear. The sun rose, and the snow on the ground was extraordinarily bright and slightly red. So charming. Chairman Mao said it well. This can be called red-wrapped. Duanfang carried 2 large buckets, steaming from his mouth, and ran from pig pen to pig pen. He hasn't come to this side of the pigsty for a long time. So to speak, he is deliberately avoiding it. He is avoiding the place where Hongqi ate shit. In fact, actually, he is avoiding the pain in his heart. The place where Hongqi ate shit always reminds Duanfang that you are the one who knelt down and kowtowed Wu Manling. Duanfang's self-esteem died on that day. Others didn't know it, but Duanfang himself knew. His self-esteem has been fed to dogs. His self-esteem has eaten shit. His self-esteem has gone. Nothing left. Unbearable. The thing Duanfang is most afraid of now is to meet Wu Manling. He doesn't know how Wu Manling despised him in her heart. When thinking of this, Duanfang's heart bleeds. He can't blame others. It was Duanfang who stabbed himself. Wu Manling is nothing else. She is now a mirror. Duanfang is just shit in the mirror. His dog shit, pig shit, and chicken shit. His eye wax, booger, and ear wax. Do people like you still want to be in the army? Forget it. Go raise pigs. There was a sudden explosion of firecrackers in the distance. It was a double sound. In the clear and blue sky after the snow, there was a dong sound, which was a little dull, but then a da sound was clear. This is just the start. The next explosions are one after another. The cold air warms up, and there's a celebration out of thin air. Duanfang put down the bucket and looked towards the east of the river. The sound of the firecrackers should have come from the brigade. Why firecrackers on a normal day? Duanfang was puzzled. The sound of firecrackers has now stopped, but the sound of gongs and drums has come one after another, resounding through the sky. Duanfang remembered that such a big movement seemed to be sending new recruits off. Yes, Dawdle Demon is leaving today. This is to say goodbye to Demon. There was a sudden pain in Dunfang's heart, and it burrowed into it. Dunfang put down the bucket and was about to go to the village. After only 2 or 3 steps, he stopped. Dunfang turned his head to the side and glanced at the distance. There were countless strands of light shining on the white earth. The snow was clean, clear, and crystal, with a fierce cold. Dunfang stood there, holding the pole, and suddenly had mixed feelings. In fact, there was nothing in his heart, and his heart was as stagnant as water. This is a contradictory situation. Hard to say. It's hard to say, then don't say it. Dunfang still put down the work in his hand and went. Sure enough, the door of the brigade was crowded with people, and the snow on the ground had been trampled into chaos by everyone, and it looked like a mess. Demon is standing in the snow, offering cigarettes to everyone. His hair was special today, steaming like a steamer with boiling water. The children surrounded Demon. Although he is still dressed in casual clothes, in the hearts of the children, he has already a red star on his head, and the red flags of revolution hang on both sides. Dunfang looked at Demon from a distance, feeling a little at a loss. He didn't know whether to walk up or stand where he was. Can't make up his mind. Dunfang thought he had to get over, and maybe it was the last time with Demon. From now on, separated. It's impossible to meet again. Thinking of this, Dunfang walked up, because the cadres in the village were all there, and Wu Mailin was also there. Dunfang braced himself, walked around behind Demon, and patted him on the shoulder. Demon turned around. Demon only glanced at Dunfang and then looked away. He took out the cigarette, which was the last one. Demon gave it and wanted to light it for Dunfang, but his hands were shaking and the match couldn't be struck. Dunfang took the match from Demon, lit it, took a big mouthful, and let it out slowly, a bit like a locomotive in a movie. Dunfang turned the cigarette in his hand and handed it to Demon, same as giving him. Demon took it over and took a big mouthful too. His hands were shaking, and the smoke was shaking. His lips twitched. He wanted to say something, but his eyes were red. Dunfang immediately stretched out his palm and patted him on the shoulder again. He felt not enough, so he patted him again. It was very heavy, and everything was silent. The two of them didn't say anything, just exchanged the cigarettes in their hands. You smoke and I smoke, like no one was around. The surroundings quieted down, watching them together. They were smoking there. After smoking, Demon threw the cigarette butt on the messy and rotted snow and stepped on it superfluously. Hit the road. Wu Mailin took the lead in applauding. Everyone applauded together. Most of the people followed Demon and slowly dispersed. Dunfang put both hands in his pant pockets, lowered his head, and just wanted to leave. But Wu Mailin stopped him. Wu Mailin said, Dunfang? Dunfang stood still and didn't look her in the eye. Wu Mailin whispered, Dunfang, ignore me? Although there were some idle people beside them, their attention was elsewhere. Dunfang and Wu Mailin stood in the sparse crowd, but instead formed a situation where they could talk secretly. Dunfang smiled unnaturally, very briefly, gone in a blink. Dunfang's smile was in Wu Mailin's eyes. She wanted to say something, but was blocked. In the end, nothing was said. Wu Mailin's heart suddenly felt a bit of grief, not only for Dunfang, but also for herself. It was the extraordinary sloppy grief. She didn't want to bounce around. In order to ease the atmosphere between the two, Wu Mailing put her palm on Dunfang's shoulder. She wanted to tell him that as long as she was still one village's secretary, she would definitely fulfill him next year. But before Wu Mailing spoke, Dunfang looked away and had already grabbed Wu Mailing's wrist and slowly put it down. This move is so hurtful. Fortunately, no one looked at them, and they did this very secretly in the crowd. Wu Mailing stood alone on the snow and narrowed her eyes. It was still lively just now, and in a blink they disappeared, leaving only her and, of course, her dog. Wu Mailing looked at the road the demon had walked away. The branches are bare, extra thin, extra messy, extra hard. Very depressing, very lonely. It is a standard, unbearable winter scene. Wu Mailing sighed. Demon was gone, and her most difficult problem was finally solved. But her mood became complicated. Half of it was because of Dunfang, and the other half was because of Demon. Demon came to the brigade last night, and it was very late. He said goodbye to Wu Mailing. Demon's farewell ceremony was quite special. He had been sitting on the bench, sitting motionless. Wu Mailing was disgusted when he saw him, and of course, she didn't give him a good face. Of course, Wu Mailing wasn't afraid either, as he probably wouldn't do anything to Wu Mailing at this time. In such a situation, both sides should have scruples. They just sat there. Wu Mailing knew that as long as she got through this moment, she would never see this face again in her life. Got through for 1 minute less. After sitting like this for an hour, Demon finally couldn't stand it any longer and stood up. He walked to Wu Mailing's side step by step. Wu Mailing's heart twitched, and she also stood up. Demon went all the way to Wu Mailing and brought his face up. Slowly, facing Wu Mailing's face, he leaned forward. In the end, Wu Mailing mustered up her courage, took a deep breath, coughed out a mouthful of phlegm, and spat it on the face of Demon with a sound. Wu Mailing's phlegm hung between Demon's brows, dripping down. Demon didn't hide or wipe, letting the phlegm drip down on the bridge of his nose. Demon said, "Mailing, thank you. I've been waiting for you to spit me." Wu Mailing stood in the snow, and Demon had disappeared. She raised her hand and looked at it. She remembered Dunfang's action just now. Dunfang's action was not much worse than her spit. Since the beginning of winter, Shen Cuizhen has always had a headache on one side, and most of the time on the left. It's hard to say how much it hurts, but it never gets better. It was okay during the day, but Shen Cuizhen couldn't stand it the most at night. The pain was severe at night, thus Shen Cuizhen couldn't sleep anymore. Occasionally she fell asleep. All dreams, always dreaming of Dunfang's childhood, always dreaming of Dunfang's father alive, lively. Such a dream can be told to Wang Cunliang, and even a generous man can listen to such a dream. How to say? Shen Cuizhen went to the CMS and found Xinglong, and Xinglong fiddled with her head, pressing it here, knocking it there, but couldn't see any clues. Xinglong said, "It's all right. When the pain is severe, take medicine. If you can't bear it anymore, get injections." Shen Cuizhen didn't get injections, but took meds, which had no effect. It still hurts. In the early morning of this day, the northeast wind had been blowing, but Shen Cuizhen called Dunfang and Dunzheng, and she wanted to take them back to her parents' home, which is Dongtan Village in Baiju Town, Dafeng County. Why did she do this all of a sudden? Shen Cuizhen had a very bad dream. She dreamed of Dunfang's father again. Dunfang's father was very unhappy in Shen Cuizhen's dream and said, Cuizhen, you haven't been back for a long time. Come back to see me. He complained. Shen Cuizhen broke out in sweats, pinched her fingers in the bed, and she hadn't been back for days. Yes, it's been a long time. Shen Cuizhen is different from ordinary women. How come she doesn't want to go back? She is afraid. There is an unforgettable side here. A woman who has never been a widow will never understand this level. The warmth and coldness here are hard to say. Shen Cuizhen woke up, lying on the bed, unable to sleep again. She wanted to cry again. As soon as she heard Wang Cunliang snoring, she had to quietly wipe her tears a few times on the pillow. Widows have complicated pillows. That night, Shen Cuizhen found the root cause of her illness very clearly. It was Dunfang's father who was talking about her. As soon as a ghost talks about someone, her head hurts. Who doesn't understand this principle? She must go back to her mother's house, Shen Cuizhen said to herself. She couldn't delay anymore. She would also go to the grave of Dunfang's dad in Xitan village to reply to the dead ghost. Don't worry anymore. Aren't I all right? Wang Village, Zhongbao Town, Xinhua County, is actually 50 to 60 miles away from Dongtan Village, Baiju Town, Dafeng County, which is not far. However, the plain of Lixia River is like this. It is a water network area, and there's no straight road. You have to go around by crossing the rivers and crossing the bridges. The actual distance you have to go is no less than 100 miles, and it takes a whole day. Actually, still far. Long distance is good. Long distance is most suitable for the second marriage of widows. Dunfang refused to go back at first, and he was also afraid. Although the other end is all relatives, the meetings with relatives are not always warm and pleasant. For some special families, it has its own pain points. This is very contradictory. On the one hand, he is close to Dongtan Village, and on the other hand, Dongtan Village makes him awkward. Dunfang grew up under the care of the villagers from childhood to adulthood, and now the whole village is his benefactor. Taking anyone with a dick, he is his father. As long as there are two tits, she is his mother. Dunfang could not forget the morning he left Dongtan Village, even when he died. His mother kept forcing him to kowtow whenever he saw anyone. Little Dunfang didn't know what he owed the world, and when would this debt be paid off. For his hometown, Dunfang's mood can only be summed up in one word: respect and stay away. Dunfang did not want to suffer such a crime. This time, his mother didn't listen to him. She tugged and pulled, took them, and hit the road. Because Shen Cuizhen left in a hurry, she didn't bring any decent gifts. She just went to Wang Village Primary School to meet Duanzheng's teacher. The teachers take cash every month, so they have more money anyway. She shamelessly borrowed 5 yuan and went home. Dongtan Village is nothing more than this, except that there are some unique aspects of people's accents. The rest is almost another copy of Wang Village. A few trees, a few low-thatched houses, with some people in between. When they came to Dongtan Village, it's already dark. Shen Cuizhen walked into her mother's house and saw her mother under the small oil lamp. They haven't seen each other for so many years. The old mother is already in her twilight years. So old that she's wrinkled and only a small handful remain, can be lifted up. Shen Cuizhen only glanced at her, and her heart was twisted in an instant. She quickly stepped up and knelt at her mother's feet. The old mother was taken aback and didn't recognize her. The old mother could never imagine that her daughter could come back at the end of the year. How cold, how windy, how far away. The old mother's mouth was good girl and a hard-working child, which broke Shen Cuizhen's heart. The girl who got married is the water that was poured out. That's just the saying. How can it be so light? Mother and daughter are always connected by flesh and blood with unspeakable warmth and isolation. In such a gap, Duanfang and his little uncle and aunt greeted each other. It was a warm reunion after a long absence, but he couldn't get rid of the anxiety. Everything is the same as in the past. The furnishings and the people in the house have not changed, but they are all old. No matter how you look at them, they are a bit paradoxical. But finally, they are still unchanged. There's a mix of joy and sorrow. There was always a thing in Duanfang's heart. It was hot and cold, arching everywhere. Shen Cuizhen knelt on the floor and, while weeping, dragged Duanzheng over and asked him to kneel. Duanfang held him back and respectfully said, "Grandmother." Duanfang couldn't make his own little brother kneel, not to anyone. Once you kneel, you can't stop kneeling. It's endless and becomes a habit. His younger brother didn't owe Dongtan village anything, and Duanfang couldn't let him kneel in this place, no matter how. Duanfang didn't sleep well that night. On his childhood bed, Duanfang was surprised to find that the quilt was the one he had used when he was a child. This discovery was amazing. The smell from many years ago drifted over and became the fingers of a hand, touching him. Life suddenly resumed. What kind of life has been continued? Where does it continue? Duanfang couldn't tell. But one thing is for sure, in turn, life has undoubtedly been cut by a knife. Chopped off, it was completely replaced, covered, and it became a different look. The original life was hidden and sealed. In fact, it is buried alive. Where have I been all these years, and how did I come here? Duanfang couldn't remember. Where is it? The problem is not so serious, but it has a tear-jerking element. Guests are guests, after all, even in their hometowns. Early in the next morning, Duanfang was caught up by Shen Cuizhen and had to go. Yeah, still gotta go. Duanfang remembered that this was just a Dongtan village. They still have to go west, and Xitan village is waiting for them. Xitan village is Duanfang's real home, where he was born and drank milk. After traveling 3 or 4 miles westward, they arrived at Xitan village. Unfamiliar. Duanfang was surprised to find that this place, connected with his own flesh and blood, had nothing to do with him. He has no memory, or all his memories have been blurred and covered with a layer of paper. Just arrived at his own home in a trance, the trembling grandfather and grandmother hugged the 2 brothers tightly. A little suffering. Duanzheng wanted to break free, but couldn't. Duanfang was numb, looking at other tears through his own tears. Those tearful eyes are cloudy, with the content of wind and frost, and the content of a long time. Duanfang kept nodding, and beside him stood his uncles and cousins. Nobody said anything. All are petting by hand. No matter who he is, it will be out of control once he opens his mouth. After a simple and short meeting, the most important moment finally came. Shen Cuizhen led Duanfang and Duanzheng to the mass grave in Xitan village. The mass grave in winter is desolate. The branches are bare, the grass is dry, the soil is hard, and the crows are yelling overhead. There is no death here, but the breath of death is extraordinarily strong and alive. Many tombs have collapsed, symbolic, just simple earthen mounds. Fortunately, Duanfang's uncle led the way, otherwise they would have lost their way into the mass grave. Finally, in front of a low, earthy yellow mound, Shen Cuizhen stopped. Before she could let go of her throat, she turned her head. Shen Cuizhen looked at her eldest son. Her face was deformed. Shen Cuizhen said, you're dead." Duanfang was startled, as if he had just received bad news. He came prepared, but at this moment, the news of death came unexpectedly and was conclusive. Duanfang's sadness came from inside. In just an instant, he was completely burned out. Duanfang's legs softened, and he knelt down involuntarily. He got down on the cold soil, caressed it carefully, and finally pinched it. The soil was broken, turned into sand, and flowed out of his fingers. That is to say, Duanfang is not holding anything. Both hands are empty. Duanfang wanted to endure it, but he finally couldn't. His voice spewed out. The voice Duanfang spewed out frightened Duanzheng. Duanzheng knelt beside Duanfang, shaking his brother vigorously. Duanzheng was terrified and kept shouting, "Brother! Brother!" This is the case with those who lost their fathers when they were young. During their growth, he knows that his father died, but at the same time, he doesn't know. On the one hand, it is out of the kindness of the adults, who are worried that the children will not be able to bear such a huge blow, and always tell the children that your father is sleeping, your father is out, and has gone very far, far away. He will come back when you grow up. Such a promise is empty, but deep-rooted. And from time to time, it reveals a sad statement. On the other hand, because they have no vivid memory of their fathers when they were young, the longer the time is, the more vague the memory of their fathers becomes, and the less they believe in death. When he's older and understands, his mind is actually clear, but he can't get rid of a stubborn fantasy. Dad will come back. Dad will appear in an alley full of sunset on a magical evening. At a corner, he will suddenly stop you, and his face will be full of spring breeze. Dad shouted your name out loud and told you, "I'm your dad, and I'm back." This kind of fantasy is heart-wrenching. How stubborn it is, how stubborn. But as long as you don't think about it, you don't touch it, don't touch it. That's fine. Just like nothing. But it is going to touch you after all. Touch is a necessity of life, and sooner or later we will meet. You can escape your grief as a child, and when you grow up, when you have to face it, your grief has to make up for it. All are to be returned. Duanfang was on his father's grave, and the deeply hidden illusion was shattered. The grave testified here. If Shen Cuizhen could understand what kind of arrow piercing Duanfang's heart now, she would have told him ruthlessly to the young Duanfang, "Your father is dead. He will never come back, and he will never come back." In this way, at least today's Duanfang will not be like this. How suffering. The physical consumption of grief is shocking. Duanfang never expected that. After crying, Duanfang actually lost a trace of strength in his body, and his whole body became soft and cramped. He couldn't get up, could only sit on the ground and daze. It was freezing cold. His butt was very cold, and the wind came up, making people's face hurt. It was Duanfang's uncle who helped him up from the ground. Only then did Duanfang see that his mother was still there. His mother was also in a daze. Her eyes were scattered, but she was concentrated, looking at something and not looking at anything. She was like thinking about something, like thinking about nothing. His mother suddenly let out a breath like a convulsion. Duanfang went up and held her. His mother didn't seem to want to stand up, as her butt was leaning on the ground. Because of the leaning, his mother cried again, but she couldn't, and there were no tears. Duanfang put his arms around his mother's waist and exerted his strength to suckle, almost pulling his mother up. Shen Cuizhen did not stand firm, staggered, and leaned against Duanfang. The wind lifted her mother's hair, which had turned gray. Duanfang had never looked at his mother's hair so closely, and suddenly realized that his mother was also old. A burst of sadness suddenly rolled over Duanfang's chest, and he blurted out, "Mom." Duanfang hugged his mother tightly. This was the only hug in their entire life. And it wasn't actually a hug. It is on the grave of his biological father. Shen Cuizhen rested her neck on Duanfang's chest, weak and limp. She answered Duanfang with a long sigh. Duanfang lay in the small hut on the pig farm for 2 days, and after 2 days his strength recovered. His internal organs were boiled in water. His stamina recovered, but Duanfang was still reluctant to get up, mainly because it was too cold. On such a cold day, what to do getting up? It's better to lay down. Hongqi, Dalu, and other guys often come over to make some reports to him, and of course ask for instructions. Because there were mainly individual conversations, Duanfang unexpectedly found that his subordinates were not united, and they always said bad things and snitched on each other. On such issues, the top side generally does not express opinions, so as not to be biased. He's not partial to anyone, which means he can fix anyone. When he was really bored, he took one out, fixed him up, and relieved the boredom. Still pretty fun. Internal struggle and education are always necessary. It is long-term, and it can be more brutal when necessary. Cruel is more fun. Duanfang likes to look at their panicked appearance, and there's unspeakable happiness in it. Do it, since idle. Duanfang held his cigarette pot in his mouth, thinking that he should pull Pei Quan out and fix him. Pei Quan's performance was not good a few days ago. He thought that Duanfang could become a soldier and would leave Wang village sooner or later. He saw hope, and there were signs that he was just around the corner, and the danger of restoration was born in him. This man, how to put it, is dishonest, and he is not reconciled to the heaven he lost. Pei Quan's biggest problem is talking and moving freely. This problem needs to be solved. This year can't, then next year. Next year can't, then the year after next. Still can't, then the year after that. To find some hardship for him to eat. Let him eat full. Duanfang was not able to solve Pei Quan's problem immediately. The situation changed, and Duanfang couldn't do it. The black sow gave birth. The black sow's cub was in the middle of the night, and Duanfang was sleeping soundly. Camel lifted the lantern and opened Duanfang's bed. Duanfang straightened up and asked ignorantly, "What's going on?" Camel's face was exceptionally excited, as if the situation was serious. Camel said, "Duanfang, get up and boil the water." Duanfang was actually still dreaming. In the dream, Pei Quan was pulled out by Dalu and Guole and was hanged from the locust tree at the entrance of the brigade. All of them surrounded Duanfang. Everyone's hand had a whip. They were waiting for Duanfang's order, ready to beat. What a dream! But interrupted by Camel. Duanfang was a little unhappy and asked, "What's going on?" Camel didn't speak this time. He pointed his chin at the black sow on the ground. Duanfang immediately understood. Camel turned his jacket over. It was black, with a rope tied in the middle. The cuffs were rolled very high. Because of his excitement, his nostrils were full of snot, and he had no time to blow it, so he could only wipe it with his arm. The horse lantern had been hung up long ago, and the lantern was twisted by Camel to a particularly large size, and the whole room was filled with the light of the horse lantern, dim and warm. Camel washed his hands, put the middle finger and index finger together, put them on the side of the black sow's farrowing door, measured, and said to himself, It's almost time. You can boil the water. Duanfang sat at the door of the pot and helped Camel boil water. The flames in the hearth reflected on Duanfang's body, and Duanfang was heated up after a while, and his drowsiness was gone. Duanfang thought, this is the first time that he did a thing like this happily since he came to the pig farm for such a long time. The water boiled, and the vigorous heat spread out along the edge of the lid. Duanfang did not stop. He was still adding grass to the hearth. He made up his mind to fill the hut with steam. Thus, the house would be warmer. The little piglets are about to come to this world. They will have just left their mother's belly, so he can't let them freeze. Slowly, the small hut became misty, reminding Duanfang of bathhouse in Zhongbao town. Camel was not far from Duanfang, but because of the fog, he was blurred and seemed far away. The atmosphere in the small hut immediately warmed up with auspicious and festival ingredients. Although there were only 2 people, Duanfang and Camel, Duanfang felt that this year's Spring Festival has come. In the first half of the night, it was the Spring Festival for 2 people, and of course, the black sow was added. Camel took his futon and placed it at the tail of the black sow, sitting there upright, waiting quietly. The appearance of Camel ruined the festival atmosphere in the small thatched hut. It was a little solemn, but overall, it was still good. Duanfang felt that they were now a family. This feeling was strange, but it is real, without the slightest element of falsehood. Camel sat there, not even smoking dry tobacco. The lantern illuminated him, and the lantern also illuminated the black sow lying on the ground. Both were only half. This still picture was in front of Duanfang, and Duanfang looked at them, which was rare in a century. The cold wind howled outside the house, lengthening its sound at the corners of the eaves and walls. It sounded extremely horrific. The good thing is the warmth in the house. Whatever. Leave it alone. Camel's patience paid off. The first little piglet showed its tiny head, not black but white. The black sow was working hard. When the little piggy's head reached the neck, Camel reached out and grabbed the little piggy. His mouth opened, and the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes shone with furry light. He was pulling. His hands were strong but softer, with an extremely slow rhythm. There was quiet cooperation between his hands and the efforts of the black sow, the kind of tacit agreement that had been negotiated in advance. Now the piggy's body came out, steaming hot. Camel's mouth was getting bigger and bigger, and it had reached the size of flesh eating. But Camel didn't notice it. The little piglet got bigger and bigger, and Camel freed one hand and held it up, and finally it was the 2 hind legs that were together. Camel pulled gently, and the first little piglet was born in the palm of Camel. Camel quietly put the firstborn little white pig on the straw, peeled off its afterbirth gently, and wiped it with the straw. Camel looked at it and smiled silently. His eyes were so nice and so kind. Camel poked the belly of the little white pig and saw that it was a little boar. Camel said, "You are lucky, little brother. You are lucky. Water, Duanfang, water." Duanfang turned around, got the water hurriedly, and gave it to Camel. Camel took the wiping cloth and put his hand in the water. He wanted to give the piggy a good hot bath. But Camel suddenly screamed, and Duanfang was startled, and so was the black sow. Looking at Camel's hand then, the skin on his hand made a trick and floated up like a balloon, blowing bigger and bigger. It eventually turned into a huge, incomparable blister, translucent and dangling. It was only then that Duanfang realized that the water he brought over was boiling and had not been mixed with cold water. Camel gasped in pain. Dunfang was extremely ashamed, and he felt guilty to death. Camel said, "It's all right. Bring me some cold water." Camel dipped his hand in the cold water and used it to calm it down. Camel said, "Dunfang, it's fortunate that I didn't act recklessly. Otherwise, the little brother's life would have been lost." Camel frowned and said, "It hurts. It hurts so much." Dunfang had to help him to stay aside, lit a bag of cigarettes, and put it in the mouth of Camel. Camel moved away. Dunfang said, "I'm really sorry." Camel said, "It's fine." After resting for a while, Camel's heart-wrenching pain was not over yet. There was a new condition on the black cell's butt. Dunfang said embarrassedly, "Let me do it." Camel shook his head and did not give Dunfang a face, and said, "I don't trust you." This night has been long, and it can be said that it is the longest night for Dunfang. However, in a sense, it was an extremely fast night. A black sow gives birth to one, rests for a while, gives birth to another, and rests for a while. A total of 16 piglets were born. The hut was full of lives. This group of little things is interesting. It is a pile of mixes. Dunfang counted them, 6 black ones, 7 white ones, and the remaining 3 were black and white, and they were floral pigs. The cutest thing is precisely the last little pig. It is a circle smaller than the old brothers and sisters in front, and it is not so energetic. It looks like it is dying. Camel washed and wiped it and wanted to hold it in his arms, but it was still inconvenient, so he sent it to Dunfang's arms. Dunfang was a little reluctant, but as soon as he saw Camel's hand, he felt embarrassed and took it. It was a little awkward at first, but then he got better. Camel said, "Dunfang, remember, the last one is dead in all likelihood, and the old sow might eat it." Dunfang's eyes widened in disbelief. How can a sow eat her own baby? Camel said, "That's how God arranged it. The sow has just finished giving birth, and her body is weak. For the sake of this large group of children, she needs nutrition." Camel said, "Dunfang, only this little piglet was rescued and saved. Can you tell others that you can raise pigs? Later you can cook a pot of porridge, and I will feed it." Dunfang said, "Let it drink milk." "How can't it drink milk?" Camel smiled. Camel said, "It can, but it can't compete with others. Do you think it's easy to get it eat? It's not easy. It has to rob." Dunfang looked at the little pig in his arms, which was washed very clean by Camel. The wrinkled face showed an old appearance from nowhere. It closed its eyes tightly and was only a little tiny, shaking ceaselessly. Poor, cute. Dunfang was full of pity for it. Dunfang raised his head, only then found that Camel's hand was twisted. The huge blister hung on his hand, and it was about to fall, and it could be broken by a gust of wind. Dunfang didn't know what to say anymore. At this time, it was already dawn, and there was a ray of dawn through the frame of the door. There were 4 or 5. Dunfang unexpectedly made a promise. Dunfang said to Camel, "Rapeseed, don't worry.